When Prince Harry's plane touched down on British soil, the mood across the United Kingdom shifted instantly. It wasn't the warm homecoming of a beloved son, nor the respectful anticipation for a royal return. It was tension, thick and undeniable, vibrating through every media outlet and echoing in hushed conversations across the country. The Duke of Sussex was back, but this time, not as a son eager for reconciliation or a prince hoping for forgiveness. No, Harry returned with an agenda, and his very first move stunned the royal household, leaving Buckingham Palace scrambling and King Charles blindsided. Harry had always insisted he sought peace with his family, but insiders say his arrival contradicted his words. Far from humility, Harry's return was a carefully orchestrated spectacle. From his sudden unannounced visit to the aggressive statements leaked through his allies and the press, the tone was combative. He positioned himself as both victim and warrior, fueling the narrative that the monarchy had wronged him while portraying himself as the one unafraid to expose the truth. This wasn't reconciliation. It was retaliation. And the royal family, already fractured, suddenly found themselves at the center of yet another storm stirred by Harry's defiance. Within hours of his arrival, Harry made his first move, a visit not to his father, nor to his brother William, but to a location deeply symbolic, the very grounds of Diana's memorial. Cameras captured his every step, and the message was unmistakable. By tethering himself once again to Diana's legacy, Harry sought to reframe the narrative. He wasn't a prince gone rogue. He was a son continuing a fight his mother could never finish. It was a dramatic play, one that cut straight into the royal family's most vulnerable wound. Palace insiders described King Charles's reaction as deeply unsettled. To him, it wasn't just Harry visiting a memorial. It was Harry weaponizing Diana's memory against the crown, leveraging emotional power in a way that bordered on manipulation. William, too, was reported to be furious, viewing the move as a deliberate attempt to undermine his own careful guardianship of Diana's image. For William, who had spent decades balancing reverence for his mother with loyalty to the monarchy, Harry's public display was nothing short of betrayal. But Harry didn't stop there. He aligned himself with organizations and causes known to be critical of the monarchy, signaling that his return to the UK wasn't about family ties, but about building alliances against the very institution he once represented. From giving impromptu speeches about accountability and justice to holding closed-door meetings with activists, Harry painted himself as a reformer, while indirectly casting his father and brother as symbols of an outdated, oppressive system. His actions sent ripples not just through royal circles, but across the global media, with commentators debating whether Harry was reclaiming his voice or destroying his last bridge back home. What infuriated the palace most, however, was Harry's refusal to follow protocol. No notice given to royal aides. No attempt to coordinate appearances with Buckingham Palace. No request for security from the royal household. Instead, Harry arrived with his own private team, his own cameras, and his own agenda. It was an unspoken declaration. He no longer recognized the palace's authority over his life, his actions, or his message. And with every move, he made it clear this was Harry versus the monarchy, and he had no intention of backing down. The rift between Harry and William reached boiling point almost immediately. Sources close to Kensington Palace revealed that William outright refused to meet his brother, declaring it pointless and provocative. To William, Harry's every step was a performance of the cameras, a carefully choreographed attempt to paint himself as the bold truth-teller and William as the silent, complicit heir. For a man as private and disciplined as William, Harry's theatrics were intolerable. The brothers, once inseparable, now stood as bitter rivals in a public battlefield neither could abandon. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle's absence from Harry's trip only added fuel to the controversy. The palace had hoped her decision to remain in California would cool tensions, but instead, it ignited speculation. Was Harry testing the waters alone, or was this merely the first wave of a broader Sussex offensive? Meghan's silence was interpreted in two extremes, either as cautious restraint or as calculated patience, waiting for the moment to strike with her own interventions once Harry had stirred enough controversy. Either way, her absence was no comfort to royals. It was a lingering shadow that suggested more drama was yet to come. Harry's next shock came when he publicly challenged the monarchy's transparency on finances, a subject usually kept firmly behind palace walls. Standing before cameras, Harry declared that accountability should begin at the very top, a point of remark many interpreted as a direct jab at King Charles himself. The statement reverberated like a thunderclap, instantly making headlines. For the royal family, it was not only humiliating but dangerous. By questioning the institution's financial integrity, Harry had crossed an unspoken line, shifting the battleground from personal grievances to institutional critique. The monarchy, already under global scrutiny, now faced renewed questions sparked by one of their own. As the days unfolded, it became clear that Harry's return was not temporary. He was setting down roots, establishing connections, and refusing to fade quietly into the background. His next move, a rumored independent initiative on mental health within the UK, directly competed with projects spearheaded by William and Kate, further inflaming tensions. To many observers, it looked less like coincidence and more like a deliberate attempt to overshadow the Prince and Princess of Wales. By the time Harry's whirlwind return reached its peak, the royal family was left reeling. King Charles had attempted to maintain a dignified silence, but his frustration leaked through carefully chosen statements about unity and respect. William withdrew further from any reconciliation, refusing even the idea of private talks. And the courtiers, those who worked tirelessly to protect the crown's image, were exhausted by yet another crisis rooted in Harry's defiance. The British public, too, grew increasingly divided. For some, Harry was a rebellious son speaking truth to power, finally breaking the centuries-old silence around the monarchy's flaws. For others, he was a petulant prince, unable to move on, exploiting his mother's memory and tarnishing his family for attention. The polarization was undeniable, and the media circus around his every move only deepened the chaos. Harry's next move, though, was the one that sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace. He announced plans to hold an independent public forum in London, a space where ordinary citizens could voice their perspectives on the monarchy's role in modern Britain. It was bold, it was provocative, and it was the ultimate act of defiance. To many, it signaled Harry's shift from a strange royal to full-fledged critic of the crown. For Charles and William, it was the ultimate betrayal. The son and brother they once trusted now stood as their most dangerous adversary. Harry's independent forum was more than symbolic. It was revolutionary. The very notion that a royal, albeit strange, would host a public discussion about the monarchy's relevance was unthinkable just a few years ago. Now, here was the king's youngest son openly questioning the legitimacy of a system that had defined his entire life. It wasn't just a son's rebellion against his father. It was a prince's rejection of monarchy itself. The announcement sent shockwaves through both political and royal circles. MPs debated whether Harry was stoking anti-monarchist sentiment at a delicate time for the country. Royal supporters called his actions treasonous, while critics of the crown hailed him as a courageous whistleblower. The divide grew sharper each day, with Harry at the epicenter of a cultural storm that only seemed to strengthen his resolve. William's frustration boiled over in private. Palace aides leaked reports of heated conversations behind closed doors, with William reportedly warning that Harry was crossing a point of no return. The heir to the throne viewed his brother's actions as reckless, irresponsible, and selfish, a direct threat not just to the monarchy's reputation, but the stability of the nation itself. Charles, meanwhile, wrestled with indecision. The king had always preferred patience over confrontation, but Harry's escalation left him cornered. A father's silence was now interpreted as weakness, and the monarchy could no longer ignore the defiance of its prodigal son. Then came Harry's speech. Standing on a small stage in London, surrounded not by aristocrats but by everyday citizens, Harry delivered words that shook Buckingham Palace to its core. He called for a monarchy that listens, not dictates, a family that embraces, not isolates. He accused the institution of being out of touch with modern Britain and insisted that the people had the right to demand change. Cameras captured every second, and within hours his remarks went viral across the globe. To many, it was the boldest attack on the crown from within its own ranks in modern history. What stunned the palace most wasn't just the words, it was the applause. Harry had found an audience, not courtiers or royal loyalists, but of ordinary people who felt their grievances mirrored in his. Suddenly, his defiance wasn't just a family drama. It was a political challenge. He had shifted the battlefield from the palace corridors to the public square, and in doing so, he had transformed himself from a strange prince into populist figure. The monarchy responded cautiously, releasing a short statement praising dialogue and unity, but refusing to mention Harry by name. Insiders admitted the palace was terrified of fueling his narrative by engaging directly, but their silence only emboldened him. Harry doubled down, meeting with journalists, community leaders, and activists, painting himself as a champion of accountability. Each appearance widened the gulf between him and his family. And yet, beneath the boldness, cracks appeared. Critics noted the hypocrisy of Harry calling for transparency while continuing to benefit from his royal title and international celebrity. Others accused him of exploiting his mother's memory for political gain. The tabloids unleashed a barrage of criticism, branding him arrogant, petulant, and out of touch. But Harry pressed on, seemingly unconcerned by the backlash. If anything, he appeared fueled by it. Every headline, whether supportive or damning, only amplified his message. The climax of Harry's return came in the form of an ultimatum. In a move that blindsided even his closest allies, Harry announced that he would no longer consider himself bound by the conventions of the monarchy unless radical change was embraced. He stopped short of renouncing his titles, but his statement carried a chilling undertone. If the crown refused reform, he would sever ties permanently and devote his life to campaigning against its injustices. For Charles, it was a nightmare scenario, his own son threatening to become the monarchy's most powerful critic. For William, it was betrayal in its purest form. And for the institution as a whole, it was an existential crisis. Never before had the crown faced such a public and sustained attack from one of its own bloodline. The public, meanwhile, was torn. Supporters hailed Harry as a visionary, someone willing to risk everything for truth. Opponents saw him as destructive, a man blinded by resentment and ego. But regardless of where one stood, no one could deny the impact. Harry had forced a conversation the monarchy could no longer control, and in doing so, he had shifted the balance of power. When Harry finally departed from London after weeks of chaos, he left behind a nation still grappling with the fallout. The monarchy had survived centuries of wars, scandals, and crises, but this wound was different. It was inflicted from within by someone who knew its weaknesses intimately. His next move remained uncertain, but one truth was undeniable. The crown could never ignore him again. In the end, Harry's return to the UK was not about reconciliation, healing, or family. It was about power, influence, and a battle for narrative control. By challenging the monarchy so openly, he shattered the illusion of unity and forced the world to confront the fractures within Britain's most famous family. The royals were left stunned not because Harry returned, but because of how he returned. With fire in his voice, conviction in his actions, and a relentless determination to confront the institution that raised him, he turned his homecoming into a declaration of war. And as the monarchy scrambled to recover, Harry had already secured his victory. The world was watching him, talking about him, and questioning the very crown he left behind.